Welcome to the Caribbean Intellectual Property Association Award Ceremony. Caribbean Intellectual Property Association is also known as CIPA. We thank everyone for joining today for this live webcast. And want to get some history on CIPA. CIPA was organized in 2009 after many employees participated in the Community Day Parade and then became officially formed in February 23, 2010. The goal and purpose of CIPA is to serve and contribute to the well-being and the welfare of the Caribbean members at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, building a legacy of progress through many nations, diverse cultures, one voice. The mission of CIPA is to make a positive difference in the development of USPTO community members and achieving their highest potential at the USPTO through activities and extended support to the Caribbean community, as well as other affinity groups here at the USPTO. For the programs, the purpose of the programs have been to increase exposure to career opportunities at the USPTO within the Caribbean community, providing a social outlet for current USPTO employees, and exposing the general membership to the diversity within the Caribbean community. There have been awards from 2010 to 2020, and as of now, the current leadership consists of President Daniel St. Cyr, Vice President Christopher Daly, Parliamentarian Derek Rose, Treasurer Jerry Darrell Fletcher, Secretary Arlene Jones. Committee chairs would be the Education Chair, Pierre Vital and Helen Bryan Johnson. For the Chair Committee, we have Hope Robinson and Arlene Jones. For the Communication Chair, we have Derek Rose and Christopher Daly. And for the Membership Chair, we have Heidi Kelly and Hope Robinson. Welcome again to the CIPA Award Ceremony. We're ready to begin. Now, Mr. Bismarck Myrie will be speaking.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And it is such an honor and privilege to be invited back to speak on Caribbean Heritage Month. I need to let you know that in preparation for today's event, that I called and I talked to my mother's close girlfriend, and I asked her, she's from the islands, I asked her for some advice what I might be speaking about. And hey, Daniel, you'll get a kick out of this. I have some big screens now in my office where I can conduct meetings. And so I put my auntie Leneve up on the screen. And you know what she was doing? She was cooking.
God.
Right? So we started to talk. And I started to tell her that at the USPTO, we are fortunate to have people from all 13 countries of the Caribbean. That we have people from Antigua and Barbuda, from the Bahamas, from Barbados, Cuba, Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago. And I told her about this. And I told her that we've been through a lot together as a community, especially around supporting our homeland during the times of great tragedy. And this led us to start talking about all of the things that we experience in the Caribbean. Hurricanes, earthquakes, landslides, floods. So I was talking to my Aunt Leneve about all of these natural disasters. And I was talking to her about the resilience of the people of the Caribbean. And as I was talking to her about all of these natural disasters, I started to become emotional. And my aunt was steady cooking. So I said, Alanine, how can you be there cooking the peas and rice when we're talking about these disasters? I was like, how do the people compartmentalize like that? And she stopped cooking and she looked straight into the camera and she said, it's not peas and rice, it's rice and peas.
That's right.
And that's when I realized how much I appreciate the ability of our workforce to compartmentalize and to thrive in the face of no matter what happens. And I thought, what a better way to start off this acknowledgement, this celebration of Caribbean American Heritage Month, to talk about how happy I am that this fantastic organization has survived this unprecedented pandemic and has been able to come together and show its true strength and its true resilience as a community. I'd also like to tell you, and I should have started off with this, I should have said that I'm very pleased to bring you greetings on behalf of the brand new director of the USPTO, Kathy Vidal. I've had an opportunity to talk to her and the rest of the executive committee about the good work of SEPA. And Kathy asked me to pass along her very best wishes for an outstanding Caribbean American Heritage Month event. She's working right now on the West Coast and she is not able to join us. Every June during National Caribbean American Heritage Month, we honor and celebrate the notable contributions of Caribbean people to the United States and the rich history and diversity of that community. This year is a very special time to celebrate Caribbean American Heritage Month because of the unprecedented representation of prominent Caribbean Americans in senior positions in this administration, to include Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black American of Jamaican heritage to hold the office. Our Secretary of Education, Manuel Cardona, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, and the Domestic Policy Advisor, Ambassador Suzanne Rice. I would be remiss if I did not also share with you that just yesterday, our director, in a show of her commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, issued a USPTO-wide announcement announcing the establishment of a DEIA steering committee. Through this steering committee, the USPTO will bring together the various diversity initiatives going on throughout the PTO to include the great work of our affinity groups, and we will re-energize those efforts, and we will re-energize them with the aim of making sure that we include everyone in hiring, in promotion, in career advancement. And so with that, let me thank you again and tell you what an honor it is to be allowed, to be asked, to be invited to speak at this Caribbean American Heritage Month event. And I'd also like to thank the founders and the officers of SEPA for their great contributions to USPTO Workplace. Thank you.
Next up, we'll introduce our keynote speaker for today. Gabriel J. Christian, Esquire, is a principal of the law firm Gabriel J. Christian & Associates, LLC, in Bowie, Maryland, here in the USA. A native of Dominica, Mr. Christian attended the University of the District of Columbia College of Business and Public Management in Washington, D.C., where he graduated with a Bachelor's of Business Administration in Procurement and Public Contracting. Mr. Christian studied law at Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C., graduating with the degree of Juris Doctor in 1991. Mr. Christian was admitted to the Maryland Bar in 1991 and is also a member of the Bar of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. From 1988 to 1991, Christian served as a law clerk at the firm of Farrington and Smallwood, and thereafter as an associate and partner from 1991 to 1997. During that time, Christian litigated insurance defense cases for clients such as Prince George's General Hospital on behalf of Dimensions Healthcare Corporation, Allstate, USAA, The Hartford, and other insurance carriers. After the passing of Thomas A. Farrington, Christian chose to represent private sector clients, churches, and personal injury criminal defense clients, and has litigated hundreds of cases in state and federal courts of Maryland. Mr. Christian has distinguished himself as the Caribbean community leader in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and as an active civic leader in Maryland. In 2007, Governor Martin O'Malley of the state of Maryland appointed Mr. Christian to the position of Judicial Commissioner, Maryland Court of Appeals. In 2012, Governor O'Malley appointed Mr. Christian as a commissioner to the first Caribbean Commission founded by a state government in U.S. history. Among leadership and civic positions that Mr. Christian has held, there is representative of the D.C. Student Coalition Against Racism and Apartheid. This is at the University District of Columbia from 1983 to 1985. There was the president of the Dominica Association of Washington, D.C., and that was from 1989 to 1998. There was founding member and general counsel, Institute of Caribbean Studies, here in D.C. from 1994 to 2015. Currently, he's the president of Rebuild Dominica Incorporated, and also a member of the Board of Visitors for the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And both of those are from 2015 to present. He's also had another president role or president capacity for the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, and that was from 2018 to 2020. Now, alongside his longtime collaborator and co-founder of the Poncas Press, Canadian Judge Irving W. Andre, Mr. Christian has authored and co-authored a number of books on Caribbean history, society, and politics. The books listed are In Search of Eden, Dominica, the Travails of a Caribbean Mini-State, 1992, Rain on the Tin Roof, 1999, In Search of Eden, Essays on Dominican History, 2002, Death by Fire, The Explosive Story of the 1963 Carnival Tragedy, 2007, For King and Country, The Service and Self-Sacrifice of the Dominican Soldier, 2008, For King and Country, The Service and Sacrifice of the British West Indian Soldier, 2009, Mamo, The Life and Times of Dame Marie Eugenia Charles, 2010, Among the Comandante Pinares, 2016, A Woman of Substance, The Life and Times of Alberta Christian, and that was 2017. Now, for the honors that Mr. Christian has held, we have Commander of the Ethiopian Lion, 1998, and the Knight Grand Cross of the Star of Honor Ethiopia, 2017, which was appointed by order of His Imperial Highness Ermias Saleh Selassie Haile Selassie of the Ethiopian Crown Council. He is married to Joan Christiane Ney Robinson, and his children are Samora Dominique Christian and Makonnen Leonard Christian. Everybody with this biography, please welcome Mr. Gabriel J. Christian, Esquire.
Well, a pleasant good afternoon, everyone. And maybe this is the first time in history that the introduction will be longer than the presentation. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you for it. And I want to, at this moment, pay tribute and honor to Mr. Bismarck Myrick, the Director of Office of Equal Employment, Opportunity, and Diversity at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Mr. Myrick, you're right. It's rice and peas, not peas and rice. And every self-respecting West Indian knows the difference. Although there's sometimes a bit of a difference between Jamaica and Guyana and Trinidad and Guyana, but I will not get into that in any substantive way this afternoon. But just to thank you, sir, for presiding over what I believe makes our country strong, and that is the ability of state institutions like the United States Patent and Trademark Office to be inclusive of all elements of those who form that apparatus that is involved in ensuring rule of law in innovation, that when you invent something in the United States, you've got copyright, you've got trademark, you've got your patent so that your invention is secure. I want to take a moment to thank my good friend Lawton Sargent, the engineer, who was so kind as to introduce me to SIPA, the Caribbean Intellectual Property Association. SIPA is doing a magnificent job, and I hope as a result of this collaborative this afternoon, we can see perhaps a relationship between SIPA and U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to have chapters in every Caribbean island so that as we face the vicissitudes of global warming, natural disasters such as hurricanes are more prevalent, we can see an effort by the United States Patent and Trademark Office to encourage in our islands the kind of innovation in industry, in housing, in food security, in technology, some of which will form part of my presentation this afternoon. I want to give thanks to the Caribbean media personalities over the years who have aided our efforts to enlighten our fellow American citizens and others about the history, the noble history and legacy of West Indians, people like Vaughan Martin, Larry Sinders, Darius Dean, and Gloria Minot, and of course our sister at Morgan State, Claudette Lindsay come to mind. I want to thank them. And I want to thank the Institute of Caribbean Studies led by Dr. Clay Nelson and the Caribbean Research and Policy Center led by Ambassador Ward for their unswerving efforts, relentless efforts to spotlight the best of our community and make meaningful contributions to the United States as West Indians have done. I stand here in the big shoes of great West Indians who've gone before me, folks of West Indian heritage like Alexander Hamilton, who came from our Caribbean, first Secretary of the Treasury. Of course, we know of Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, Colin Powell, Stokely Carmichael, Marcus Garvey. But there are lesser known figures, some of whom I will, in this presentation this afternoon, will seek to illuminate for the benefit of the education that we seek to proliferate throughout our community. So to Arlene Jones and all the technical team, all the folks at SIPA who brought me here, thank you. To the Director of the Office of Diversity, thank you. At this point in time, Ms. Jones, I will want to begin the program focused on Caribbean civic leadership, science and technology, and the U.S. connection. And if you can begin to roll the PowerPoint so that our audience can be seized of the information, I'd appreciate it very much. While that's being set up, I would want to explain that the United States 13 colonies, which preceded the forming of the United States, benefited from Caribbean finance capital from the sugar industry. The sugar industry, I will posit in today's presentation, was the single most important driving force that provided finance capital to set up U.S. universities like Harvard and Yale to a great degree. Former President Trump was born in Jamaica, New York, not Jamaica because of the link between the 13 colonies which preceded 1776 and the Caribbean islands. There's an enormous amount of connectivity. So let's start with the Atlantic slave trade in historical perspective, ladies and gentlemen. The Atlantic slave trade was a historical event of great import and far-reaching consequences. Whether they wished it or not, few people who lived during the 18th and 19th centuries could avoid being touched in some way by the powerful economic forces, violence, and widespread social dislocations occasioned by the slave trade stretching from the Gold Coast to the Americas and from the Horn of Africa to the far-flung corners of Asia. Millions of people were caught up in that upheaval. Often overlooked in that grim history is how there evolved a dynamic Caribbean civic leadership with mastery of language, skilled in science and technology of the industrial age. That mastery of language, competence in science and technology, and the ability to survive in harsh tropical conditions made for the Caribbean islands and their diaspora to survive and thrive. Next slide. Essentially, the point I'm making here is that slavery, though grim it was a process, imparted much good in what we were able to do with that which we were exposed to. Sugar is white gold. Sugar was the single most important commodity in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. By 1680, sugar was being produced on nearly all of the British and French islands of the Caribbean. The sugar cane had become the dominant crop of the region. British came later, and with a strong navy, dominated the trade and grew its economy. White gold, as British colonists called it, was the engine of the slave trade that brought millions of enslaved Africans to the Americas, beginning in the early 16th century. The history of every nation in the Caribbean and much of South America and parts of the southern states of the United States were forever shaped by sugarcane plantations, started as a means of generating cash and finance capital by European powers. Next slide, please. That's a simple portrait of what it looked like on a West Indian sugar plantation in the earlier part of the 19th century, 18th century rather. And here you see the base of the system. That's the cane and the field. And so the sugar industry was an agro-industrial complex. Agro in that the cane was grown, industrial in that the cane was then taken to the pressing house where it was milled, that is squeezed, the juice extracted, so you can get molasses, and molasses then into sugar and rum. Next, please. Producing the sugar crop. Between 1764 and 1791, the British West Indies produced over 1 million tons of sugar. Growing sugar was hard and labor-intensive work. Sugar was produced in the following way. The ground had to be dug, hoed, weeded, planted, and then fertilized with manure, all under the hot West Indian sun. Slave gangs, consisting of men, women, and children, were worked under white overseers. They were whipped for not working hard enough. Enslaved people worked from dawn until dusk. At harvest time, sugarcane was cut with machetes and loaded onto carts. This was backbreaking work. The harvested cane was taken to the sugar mill where it was crushed and boiled to extract a brown, sticky juice. That is what you call molasses. Operating that machinery was very dangerous work. People working there could be maimed or even killed. The sugar boiling houses were unbearably hot and difficult to work in during the summer. At harvest time, it was common for enslaved people to work 18-hour days, while some people were forced to work for as long as 48 hours without a break. Sugar juice was then left in barrels until a brown syrup called molasses could be drawn off. This was used to make another of the Caribbean exports, rum. A lot of you, of course, have known of rum and Coca-Cola on the weekends and sometimes other times. The clearer sugar was left behind, and that would then be packed into barrels and shipped to Europe. The processing of sugarcane was very meticulous a process. It had to be done in quick time because the juice taken from the crushed sugarcane could turn sour and spoil within 24 hours. And so our enslaved ancestors had to be brisk and had to be quick and had to be nimble with time management. Next slide. This is a plate to show an old sugar mill in Martinique, which is close to Dominica, where I'm from, which showed at the upper right-hand corner, the sugar mill where the worker is put in the cane, stalks into the 3 cogs there so that the juice can then go down. And you can see, and I'm sure it's not as good as the patent office drawing, it wouldn't pass muster, but the channel takes it into that vat, and that vat then puts the juice into the different pans where they are being heated. You can see beneath the plate. And of course, you get molasses, and then after molasses, the sugar crystal. Next slide, please. The Industrial Revolution. The Right Honorable Dr. Eric Williams, Oxford scholar, in his famous book, Capitalism and Slavery, explained how the finance capital of the thank you for the comment, Mr. Hernandez. The finance capital of the West Indian sugar plantations propelled Britain's Industrial Revolution and that of Europe. And so it also is the case that sugar transformed the colonial diet. The caloric intake was heightened, and with the increased caloric intake, you had more energy, so you had more productivity, and so many advances in technology, globalization, and the influence of sugar trade saw the growth of industry in Europe. There are also reasons to believe that in the late 19th century diet, which was very unhealthy and uneconomical, once sugar was introduced, there was, in fact, a great expansion of variety. It is said that many colonial meals consisted of starch, and then when sugar was added to the meals, you had greater variety. So sugar was a game changer, not only in industry, but also in diet. In many colonial settings, you had people now being able to preserve their food, and that was not limited to just simply using sugar to sweeten substances, but to can food, preserve food, jams, jellies, syrups, and the like. And that rise of sugar transformed not only industry, it transformed cuisine, it transformed color, it transformed culture, and it allowed for England's society to move from its feudal, hierarchical, status-based medieval nature to being a more modern, industrial, and sort of cosmopolitan nation. Next slide, please. This is simply a mock-up in color of a steam-driven sugar mill. So in the early days, the mills were driven by ox or sometimes horses, and sometimes by human beings. But as the wealth of the sugar plantocracy increased, you saw the movement into the Caribbean of custom-made machinery with cogs and steam-driven to increase productivity. So this is an 1823 West Indian sugar mill, steam power. And I go on to say that mastery of the industrial age engineering skills aided workforce development by West Indians, because the enslaved West Indians, while they were enslaved, were made to work machinery, and you will see how that gave, in time to come, an edge to West Indians in the industrial arts. And oftentimes it's said, what sometimes men make for evil, God makes for good. And that is the really core of my presentation. Next slide, please. Before I ask the question, who is this man? And you can use your chat, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. Who is this man? And what does he have to do with the spirit of West Indian innovation in the United States? While you use your chat to give me some, I won't say guesses, let me know who you think he is. I will say that the close proximity between the enslaved Africans in the West Indies to industrial machinery at its height, because the agro-industrial combine of the sugar plantation at that time in human history was the most advanced. For instance, Isaac Watt developed the steam engine, but its first use in industry was in Jamaica, taking cane from the sugar field to a pressing house in Jamaica. And so there was a close correlationship between British industrial ingenuity and its utilization in the West Indian sugar industry. I have not seen anything in the chat, but brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jan Mestliger. Jan Mestliger was born in what is now Suriname, in those days Dutch West Indies, or Dutch Guyana rather, and he was the son of a Dutchman and an African mother, and moved to Philadelphia. Later on, he had been a shipbuilder in the Caribbean, went to Massachusetts, working in a shoe factory. In those days, it would take about 1 day to make about 2 dozen pair of shoes. And he developed an automatic machine, the shoe lacing machine, to connect by automatic device that he designed and patented. And I actually have the patent number, the top of the shoe with the sole of the shoe. It's called a shoe lacing machine. And this West Indian revolutionized the United States shoe industry. And the US Patent Office folks were so amazed by the contraption. They did not know how it worked. They sent a team of 6 people to Massachusetts to actually see the machine in operation, because they did not believe it was possible. And you move then in US shoe manufacturing from being able to only do 2 dozen pairs of shoes a day, because it was all handmade, to doing 700 in 1 day, thereby allowing American citizens to be able to buy shoes. Obviously, the shoes that were handmade were much more expensive. Now that they were machine made, they were much cheaper. And so here is the person whose role was critical in ensuring that as many Americans as possible had shoes on their feet. So let's hear it for Jan Mestliger, a proud West Indian. Next plate, please. This is a very important transition, because the point that I make is that familiarity with the industrial arts, that mastery of the English language, that ability to work in teams, that ability to work on time, that ability to be productive, though in a slave condition, imparted skill sets that made the West Indian working man and working woman very prized. It was only within the past 10 years that I found out that not only did I knew West Indians had built the Panama Canal. Our grandfather, William Matthew Christian, was one of the workers on the Panama Canal. However, prior, West Indians had built railroads in Ecuador. They had built railroads in Costa Rica. Why? Well, that's because Jamaica was one of the first countries with a railroad. So there were many Jamaicans who were skilled in laying rail. And so they were taken to Ecuador by British engineering firms and taken to Costa Rica by British engineering firms and taken to Panama by British engineering firms to lay railroads and set up railway systems. That's a very little known history of West Indian working men and women in the industrialization of South America and other parts of the world. So here we have West Indian and U.S. workers on the Panama Canal construction around 1910. Panama Canal, one of the wonders of the world, the greatest infrastructure project in human history, a product of a connection between U.S. ingenuity and capital and West Indian know-how, endurance, and ingenuity and skill, birthed a canal that today uses the intricate locks that were developed to move ships from the Atlantic to the Pacific and the Pacific to the Atlantic, across the mountain range, across that narrow isthmus, more than halving the time it would have taken if you had to go all the way around, Punta del Fuego down by Argentina and come up on the other side of the earth. So the Panama Canal was built with West Indian labor. And at the end of this, we'll have a little treat where I recently, having visited Panama and the canal, met some grandchildren of the West Indians who built the canal. Next slide, please. This is just a note on Jan Messinger. He was born on September 15th, 1852, and died on August 24th, 1889. He invented the shoe-lacing machine, U.S. patent number 274207. He was inducted into the National Hall of Inventors in 2006. And so if the U.S. Patent Office does not have a statue to Mr. Messinger or some sort of identifier, then it should be done as a result of this, illumination of his great work in the American Industrial Revolution with regard to shoe manufacturing. Next slide, please. So when I visited Panama within the past couple of weeks at the African Summit organized by the 6th Region, Dr. Millard Barrow, thank you for organizing that event. I was given, through the work of Leonardo Sainier's brother Ray, who contacted the archives of Panama, I actually got our grandfather, William Christian's payroll check request from 1915. He was born in Antigua, died in Dominica later, my father's father, as a police officer. So here we have what is called in law the corroborating evidence of his work on the Panama Canal project. We had known of it, but we had no documentation to verify that he had done that. And here we have it now. William Matthew Christian, and he was listed as an artisan. So he was skilled. You can see he's writing in cursive like John Hancock. Thomas Jefferson was highly literate, and he was able to read music, and his son wrote the national anthem of Dominica, Lemuel Christian. Next slide, please. In aviation, which came to, of course, the fore after Kitty Hawk and Wilbur and Orville Wright, West Indians were very eminent. And one of the most eminent early aviators of the American civilization was Hubert Fauntleroy Julian, the Black Eagle of Harlem. He designed and patented a parachute-type airplane escape device in the 1920s. He was born in Trinidad in 1897. And this is Mr. Fauntleroy there in one of the planes that he piloted. And hopefully one day we can get the actual patent and have it displayed. I did have some drawings of it, but that was not available for display today. But Hubert Fauntleroy Julian of Trinidad, another pioneer West Indian, the Caribbean West Indian / United States connection coming to the fore. Next slide, please. Captain Hugh Bolzac was from St. Vincent. The island of Union Island is part of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He was the first Black merchant marine captain. He went to Nautical Academy in the United Kingdom, later came to Baltimore because of racial segregation, could not get the captain of the ship. And during World War II, President Roosevelt's administration designed a ship called the Booker T. Washington after the founder of Tuskegee University, Booker T. Washington, the great African-American educator. And Captain Hugh Molzack was chosen to be first captain of that ship. And he was West Indian, or as you say, I use the word West Indian and Caribbean interchangeably. And so we are proud of him. Again, blazing a trail not only in the skies, but on the seas. Next slide, please. I think this is very important. Very few people know that before the Tuskegee Airmen in 1941, March of 1941 is where the Tuskegee Airmen experience began. And I'm pleased to have been part of the association, continue to be part of the association. I'm asking as many of you at the United States Patent and Trademark Office to join us at the East Coast chapter Tuskegee Airmen Inc., and you will not regret it. You will make a continuing contribution to the onward march of our civilization. But these men are all Caribbean. They are from different parts of the Caribbean: Jamaica, Trinidad, Dominica, Grenada, Barbados, the Bahamas, Guyana. And this is at the end of World War II. And during World War II, no nation or group of nations contributed more men to the Royal Air Force than the British West Indies, 7,000. Half of them were from Jamaica, because most of the people from the Caribbean who speak English are Jamaican, because Jamaica is the biggest country by way of population. Why is this important? Well, after the defeat of the Germans, of the British rather, at Dunkirk, Britain was on its back. The Royal Air Force was struggling. The British government of Winston Churchill sent a secret circular to the governors of the Caribbean, said, we need the best men from the West Indies who are capable of operating sophisticated machinery and aviation skills that can be accrued by them based on their competence. And we need only the best men to associate with our best men, because the Royal Air Force, being a highly sophisticated organization, and 7,000 came, and they distinguished themselves. And there's, again, a basis for that, and that is over those centuries of a close affinity between West Indian working men and women, the industrial arts, they're evolved that competence in science and technology that gave West Indians being able to speak English, familiar with the technology of the industrial age. When they traveled the world, they had an edge in the marine sciences. They had an edge in aviation, and they had an edge in way of familiarizing themselves with technology wherever they went. And that is why there were so many of them, and that's why they did so well in the Royal Air Force as bombardiers, navigators, which is a lot of mathematics. And this gentleman here at the center, from Trinidad and Tobago, Philip Louis Ulrich Koros, came to Washington in 2009 at 92. He did 80 missions over Europe, 20 over Berlin, leading the attack as a ace navigator bombardier. He told me he used a protractor and a slide rule to navigate. In those days, no computers, no smartphones. All had to do it by hand in a cramped cockpit. And he was given highest honors and was the most highly decorated West Indian, and became a squadron leader of 139 Squadron Bomber Command. Next plate, please. After the war, because of the notable successes of the West Indians and the Royal Air Force, they'd shown their ability to be disciplined, to be mentally acute, to be competent in mathematics and engineering. England invited thousands of West Indians, including many of my family, to the United Kingdom to work in factories and to rebuild England. Because as you know, during the war, England was bombed by the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and there are many cities that were bombed out. So West Indians helped to rebuild England. Here are some West Indians at a factory in London making windows for the rebuilding effort post-World War II. They're called the Windrush generation because many of them came on a ship called HMS Windrush, and many of those who came back were actually former members of the Royal Air Force. Next slide, please. This is a fantastic time to segue into Robert Rashford. Robert Rashford is founder of Genesis Engineering. He's a NASA program manager and pioneer in aerospace technology. Mr. Rashford is the son of a Jamaican Royal Air Force officer who, during the war, was involved in Bomber Command in providing fuel to Lancaster, Halifax, and Blenheim bombers. So Rashford came to the United States at the age 18 and became an aerospace engineer. And for 21 years, managed the toolbox on the Hubble telescope. He has built, for the first time, based on his experience managing the Hubble telescope's toolbox, a single-person spaceship, the prototype of which I've seen, but I can't talk about it. He runs the only aerospace manufacturing plant within 100 miles of the White House, only one of its kind. Within his factory, he has 4 factories, mini factories, producing his own nanotechnology chips, because he cannot, because of the highly sensitive nature of his work, import chips from overseas. Everything has to be made right here in the United States. And when I became president of the Tuskegee Airmen, we were honored. That's actually a page out of the program, to have him as our keynote speaker, so he could inspire young people, West Indian, African American, and other, about the importance of thrift in way of one's conduct of financial affairs, the importance of education, particularly in the area of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and the importance of applying oneself. And so today, during the Caribbean American Heritage Month 2022, we paid tribute to Robert Rashford and others like him, who have burnished the image of our people in being part of that continuing journey of excellence in the arts and sciences that West Indians and all Caribbean people have made in way of contribution to the onward march of the United States, and by extension, the Caribbean, because those who have done well in the United States, by and large, have returned some of that value, some of their financial wherewithal and their know-how to the islands from which they came. And may we always be of that orientation. Next slide, please. As a proud child of Dominica, a proud West Indian, I'm always happy to promote our island and our islands plural. Dr. Arlene Simon is from my island of Dominica. She's a patented inventor. So you've got a patent at the United States Patent Office. I know her father is Algie Simon, her aunt here, Laurel Winston, Uncle Dave Winston. They are part of the Dominican community and have done great things. She's a biomedical engineer, children's author, and entrepreneur. She's recognized as a trailblazing female innovator by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So folks, I want to give you a round of applause for having recognized someone from Dominica for her work in the biomedical engineering sciences. Arlene invented a blood test that detects when cancer patients reject bone marrow transplants. Her passion for healthcare has led her to design syringes, train clinical lab technologists in Kenya, help build supercomputers, and new design medical imaging equipment. So let's hear it for Arlene Simon. Let's hear it for women who continue to support us in myriad ways. Congratulations to Arlene, and I want to thank the United States Patent and Trademark Office for recognizing her, and many others like her who keep on pushing the envelope. Next slide, please. So I just want to say that factors that aided the rise of a Caribbean global technocracy was mastery of the English language, mastery of technology, and unrelenting self-confidence. So you had Marcus Garvey of Jamaica, Malcolm X, whose mother was Grenadian, Dr. Eric Williams, who taught at Howard, Bob Marley, who worked as a car assembly plant worker in Delaware. Many people don't know that Bob Marley actually assembled cars in Delaware. Sidney Poitier from the Bahamas, who broke many barriers in film. And of course, Philip Louis Aldrich Cross, Distinguished Service Order, Distinguished Flying Cross, also known as the Black Hornet, who, as Royal Air Force Squadron Leader, 159 Squadron Bomber Command, was an indispensable ally of the United States in its defeat of fascism over the skies of Europe in allied efforts with the United States Army Air Forces. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of Mr. Cross given to myself and Irvin Andre in 2009. It says here, RAF Squadron Leader Philip Louis Aldrich Cross, 1917-2013, aviator, diplomat, judge, and civic leader. He was the epitome of Caribbean leadership in war and peace. He was kind, just, gracious, and brave. We salute Mr. Cross today, and we do this partly in his memory, because in 2009, we had him here as part of Caribbean American Heritage Month at Andrews Air Force Base and at the White House earlier that morning. And he left an indelible mark on all those who met him in his eloquence. He was debonair, he was dashing, he had skill, and he had ingenuity. Next slide, please. Finally, we shall remember them. Caribbean American Heritage Month honorees of June 19th, 2009. Standing to the left is the first African American to be Director of the White House, Admiral Stephen Rochon, formerly U.S. Coast Guard Admiral. Next to him is our mother, Alberta Christian, who's the wife of our father, Wendell Christian. Royal Air Force Squadron Leader, veteran, World War II, Philip Louis Aldrich Cross. Next to him is Estrap, wife of Dudley Thompson. Next to her, Ambassador Curtis Ward of Jamaica, who made the visit to the White House possible. Front row is Wendell Christian, British Army, World War II, veteran. Next to him is Burning Spear, Rhodes Scholar, Oxford University, Queen's Counsel, Dudley Thompson of Jamaica, who was one of the first black flight lieutenants in the Royal Air Force during World War II. So we remember them and we salute them for their service, because their service protected democracy, aided the United States in its rise. That's why we salute them as we salute CIPA and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for having me here this afternoon to give this presentation of Caribbean civic leadership, its link to science and technology, and how, though out of the bowels of difficult slavery, we acquired the skills, the endurance, the faith, and the ability to overcome based on our mastery of language, workforce skills that allowed for people not only to survive, but to thrive. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions you may have for those of you who feel free to do so. If you want to just put your hand up, you can ask a question.
I do have a question from our public attendees. Were the steam machines invented by the enslaved members?
No, the steam engine was invented in the United Kingdom, but it was utilized in the Caribbean sugar industry, where people who were enslaved had to learn to master its utilization in industry. So that's where you had that transmission of skill. Yes. So that you have to be able to operate boilers, you have to be able to mend the boilers when they broke, and all of those skills gave them an edge in the industrial arts.
Oh, thank you very much. I have another question. Is there a patent number for the Panama Canal project? Do you know?
I don't think there would be a patent number for the project, because the project was a sort of combination of a lot of different technologies. You had railroad, you had excavators, and a lot of those individual industrial pieces of technology already had patents established for them as standalone components. What the project benefited from was the marshalling of all of those resources, both human and technological, in one place under one management to achieve the effort. But the project as a project, I don't think would have a patent number. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, maybe it would be a good time for us to play that little clip that
Yes,
of the members that you interviewed as well. Jay,
Indeed.
can you play that for us, please?
And as that comes up, the person who's receiving them is a grandson of Emperor Haile Selassie, who was attending the summit, and he met the grandchildren of those who built the canal, many of whom were engineers on the canal. And they speak of how their service helped the canal to continue after the U.S. left in 1977.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were just speaking to Javier Montilla. Javier Montilla is...
By the way, this is Arcelio Atley, and he's the director of the West Indian Museum of Panama. Am I correct?
I'm the president of the Friends of the West Indian Museum.
Okay, good. Tell us about the West Indian Museum. Why was it set up?
Here's a prince.
Prince is here? Oh, Prince Amias. Prince Amias, I would like to introduce you to the Friends of the West Indian Museum, the children of the people who built the canal.
I saw the canal yesterday. Got a glimpse of the history.
Okay. And we, of course, we pride ourselves in being...
Hello. Nice to meet you, sir.
I would like, if Prince Amias, who went to the canal yesterday, could say a few words on what it meant to see what was built by African hands.
It was a feat of engineering, but the work that went into it, the sacrifices made, will remain with me for the rest of my life. And it is truly remarkable how in that weather, for the lowest wages, Africans were able to build that. So that will always be there.
Thank you so much, Presemius. I'm just going to go around and ask your name and who are you descended from on the canal.
Sure.
Let us have your name.
I'm Cedric Gittens, Cedric W. Wilberforce Gittens, descendant of Jamaica. My grandparents were from Jamaica, both of them, mother and father. So I'm actually a third-rate Jamaican working in Panama for the canal.
So you also worked on the canal?
Yes, I worked in the canal as a fire captain. I retired as a fire captain in the fire department.
Thank you so much. So you're a third generation?
Third generation.
Thank you. That means your great-grandparents were...
Okay, my grandfather, one came from Black River, and the other one came from St. Elizabeth, Jamaica.
Amazing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my
Give us your name.
My name is Canute Coburn. I'm also third generation. My grandparents came to Panama early at the construction, and they stayed here, and they had 12 kids born here, and my father, my uncles, several of them also worked at the canal.
And did you also, when you...
I worked at the canal with electrician, and then engineer, manager, went through the ranks.
Amazing. And now you are now part of the Friends of the West Indian Museum.
I am, certainly.
And why is the West Indian Museum so important?
It's very important for all of us to let people know, especially young kids that are coming up right now, what our history is, what we did, and where we came from, and just what the history is, and hopefully it becomes a strong history in their hands.
And you still speak, after all these years, third generation, in a Spanish-speaking country, you still speak perfect English.
Yeah. Well, I spoke English before I spoke Spanish.
Okay. Thank you. Brother Arcelio, can you give us your full name and your roots?
Okay, my name is, I'm sorry for the hoarseness. I've been managing the fair for 2 days.
And that's the West Indian Fair?
The West Indian Fair, I've lost my voice. But my name is Arcelio Hartley, and I also am a third generation descendant of West Indians who came from Jamaica. Both maternal and paternal grandparents came from Jamaica. My paternal grandfather worked on the railroad for the, he started before the construction of the canal. And my maternal grandfather, who went to Cuba, then came to Panama, worked also for the canal. My father worked in the canal, I worked in the canal. Eventually, building on the very small foundation that they had, because they came and they had very little, but they instilled in us a lot of pride. And we were able to use that and push that along with the education that we got and move upwards. So many of those that you see, all of them, became and occupied ranks of managers and leaders within the canal.
You were also a leader in the canal. Tell us what you did.
Well, I became a turbo master, became a pilot, and then I became the manager of Transit Operations Division.
Outstanding.
And, I served that during the key moments.
Boss, he ran the canal for a while.
So he ran the canal?
During the key moments of the transition into Panama's operation. So
from the United States?
From the United States to Panama. So we were instrumental, I feel, in the transition being an effective and successful one. Because all of us here, including Clarence over here, were part of that preparation that were allowed the transition to be smoothless, seamless, and without a hitch.
So you're saying the West Indians possessed the knowledge that allowed Panama to take control in a seamless manner?
In fact, we at the West Indian Museum recently produced a documentary where we interviewed several old retired apprentices who became journeymen and were part of that essence of preparation for that transition.
And that is, of course, about this 8th or 7th wonder of the world, this canal.
It is so.
Thank you so very much. And I want to thank you for keeping the heritage of the West Indian miners and diggers and engineers who built the canal. I'll go to
Clarence, over here.
Give us your full name, sir.
Clarence George Jr. I have Jamaican on maternal side, both Jamaican on the maternal side, on the paternal side from Trinidad.
From Trinidad.
And also I'm third generation.
So they worked on the canal?
Well, the Jamaican side never worked on the canal.
Okay.
They came to build not only the canal, but also to build Panama and have her take her position in the world as a cosmopolitan nation.
Yes.
And In 1917, 14, there was supposed to have been an international fair in Panama showing all the benefits of the new canal being built. And my grandfather from Jamaica came here to build that in Panama itself.
I see.
So the other one from Trinidad was a boat builder and also a launch operator.
I see.
And he worked in the canal, and then after the canal was built, left to Cuba and returned to Panama to work again on the canal.
And did you work on the canal yourself?
I worked on the canal. I started as an apprentice, 1960. Ended up passing through as the dock master of the canal and also as an inspector.
So you're saying that the West Indian leadership on the canal was indispensable to its success?
The Caribbean, I hate to call it West Indian, the Afro-Caribbean influence made Panama be cosmopolitan because it just wasn't the canal. We're talking about the religion that we brought. We're talking about the lodges that we brought. We're talking about all the different organizations that we brought. We're talking about the food. We're talking about the way, the dress code, the habits, the entire contribution of the writers and the musicians that we brought, the athletes that we brought. Panama got its first Olympic medal from Afro-Caribbean, Panamanian-born athlete. It got its Latin America got its first boxing championship of the world from a Jamaican or an Afro-Caribbean born Panamanian. So we have been an intricate part of putting Panama as I like to steal the phrase of manifest destiny. We are the ones with a manifest destiny because we came out of the sea 3 million years ago and we brought the Caribbean with us. And so it was only fitting that the Isles of the Caribbean came in to help the sister or the mother, whichever one you want to call it, to be what it is, the center of the world, the center of the universe, the crossroads of the world.
And how comes you speak English so well?
I have a confusion between my left side and the right side of my brain. One speaks Spanish and the other one asks English to be interpreted, but I was lullabied in English. I learned to pray in English. I learned to count in English before I could even speak Spanish. My childhood was West Indian, Afro-Caribbean, wall to wall, until when I was about 13 years old.
Outstanding. Well, I Arcelio, let's just let me say a few words. I want to say a few.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. We just have comments. There's no other question, but I am happy to say that one of our attendees says, I want to congratulate the presentation, or should I say, I'm pleased to have learned a very important history lesson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, that concludes our program, and we will close out our presentation with Mr. Byrick.
Well, there's not much left to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Christian, for that fantastic educational presentation. I've been getting a lot of instant messages from people who said that I failed to mention Puerto Rico as part of the Caribbean islands. But I always think about Puerto Rico as being part of the United States, which of course it is. I really also would like to thank everyone who played a role in preparing today's program, and especially to the officers who invited Mr. Christian to present. I wish you all the very best Caribbean American Heritage Month. So long.